So by the end of this video, you should be able to explain the meaning of place in the marketing mix. Now, place in the marketing mix is often misunderstood. When we talk about place, we don't necessarily mean the place where the product or service is sold to the customer. When we talk about place in the marketing mix, we're really talking about the channel or the route through which goods move from the manufacturer or the producer to the final user. So place can involve intermediaries in that link the manufacturer and the final users, people like distributors, wholesalers and retailers. And every business needs to make a choice about how it's going to get its product or its service to the customer. What distribution channel is it going to use? And that's what we mean when we talk about place. So I've used this term distribution channel, and all we mean by that is how do we distribute our products so that they get to our customer? How do we even distribute our services so that they get to our customer? What's the best way for our businesses and our customers to do that in the world as it is today? And we need to start thinking about that by considering what we mean by intermediaries and what they do and what benefits they bring. And of course, also what costs they might bring as well. So intermediaries are those people between the manufacturer and the customer. They could be retailers, they could be agents, they could be brokers, they could be wholesalers. Any organization or business that is involved in that journey of the product or service from the original creator to the consumer itself. Let's think about that a little bit more. So if we had no intermediaries at all, no intermediaries, then every producer would have to get their product to their customer on their own. Every producer would have to make hundreds and thousands, perhaps millions of deliveries to its individual customer to make that sale. Now, for some businesses, that's easy, isn't it? If I'm Netflix, for example, I just put my services online and my customers can access them individually with pretty much no intermediary. Although we could argue that perhaps the internet service provider acts as some kind of intermediary. So this is a system that suits some businesses. And of course, it means that if you can get your product to your consumer, your customer, without any intermediaries, then you've got lower costs. You don't have to pay your intermediary. You can deliver the product at a lower cost to your customer. However, that cost saving might be wiped out by the cost that you yourself incur by providing each customer with a service. So the alternative is that we have a distributor in the middle, or an agent, or a broker. So the producer sells or routes their goods through the distributor, and it's the distributor that amasses goods and services from a range of different providers and then distributes those on to all the customers. So the distributor, that is what they're good at. They're good at moving goods around, delivering to individual customers, and breaking the bulk that comes from the producer. So what is the function of those intermediaries? Well, they can gather and distribute information that's useful for the consumer and for the producer. They can engage in promotions for the consumers. Think about this. If I'm a manufacturer, say of footwear, I'm good at manufacturing. Those are the skills. I can source the raw materials I need. I've got skilled workers who can make my products. Do I necessarily have the skills and the capital equipment that's required to distribute those products and to promote those products well to customers? Can I contact prospective buyers very easily? And a place to stop and pause here is to think about your own education with study group. How did you book your course at the ISC in Sussex? Did you do it directly with study group or did you go through an agent? Most international students book their college courses, their university courses through an agent. Why do they do that? Well, you can go along to the agent. The agent will tell you about a number of different courses at a number of different universities, possibly in a number of different countries even. They can tell you about the different costs of all those courses. They can tell you about the different benefits of all those courses. And those agents as well, they live in your country. They know how to contact you much better than study group does. So they're really able to gather information from a range of sources and deliver it to students and families in their locality. They can promote those courses to students and families in their locality, and they're in a better position to be able to contact prospective students than a company like Study Group is. They can match the different offer to your needs, can't they? So because they've got an overview of all the different college courses that you could go on, once they speak to you and they know that you're interested in a business course and they have an idea of the level of your English and your exam results, they can begin to say to you, okay, well, I think these 3 or 4 universities might be good for you. And then they can negotiate the transaction with the provider. They can perhaps go to the university and ask them things like, can you support this student with their particular needs? Can you support this student with finding accommodation? Can you perhaps give this student a discount or a scholarship? So in a service-based environment like education, you have probably experienced the value that a broker brings to that process. But in the case of physical goods, that intermediary might actually be involved in distributing the goods as well. They might also help with financial transactions along the channel, whether that's helping with the consumer's finance to pay for the product or service, or whether that is finance further up the chain. They can still help with that. And they sometimes will assume the risks of channel work. So intermediaries are vitally important for many businesses, whether they're offering products or services, but it's always a case that for each business with their set of products, they need to choose the channel that suits them better, that works best for them. Because of course, Study Group has to pay their agents. There is a cost in having an agent, but the agents bring enough value for that to be worthwhile, both for the consumer, the student, and for the provider. So when we think about goods as opposed to services, we think about perhaps the high street, but increasingly, especially post 2020, we think about online shopping, don't we? So this is some interesting data, and I particularly picked this from 2018 just to show you that this trend was already in place. So this tells us about changes in the UK high street in 2018 and how the number of shops that were closing had started to rise dramatically. So we see that between 2013 and 2018, British high streets lost about 2,500 shops. Now in 2020 with coronavirus, that number has gone through the roof. I think it's probably doubled. So if all those shops are closing, how are businesses getting their products to us now? Well, we're buying them online, aren't we? We're buying them online in huge numbers. But whether we're buying online or whether we're buying in the high street, we can do that in different ways. So there will be some businesses, whether they're online or on the high street, who are selling their products direct to us as consumers with no intermediaries whatsoever. And think about Tesla, for example. If I want to buy a Nissan car, I need to go to a car showroom where they might stock Nissans and Hondas and various other car makes, and I can choose my car there. If I want to buy a Tesla, I can only buy that from Tesla, direct from the producer. I will buy that through their online channels, or occasionally through a physical presence, but it's always directly from Tesla. There are no intermediaries. That's the way they go. Apple, very similar. And we noticed that both of these companies, Tesla and Apple, are companies with very strong brands. They're so strong that we are willing to go out of our way to particularly visit their website or their high street presence just to look at their products. We don't necessarily always feel that we need a choice. However, for most businesses, that's not sufficient. For most businesses, we will go and buy that product through a retailer. And again, that retailer might have a physical presence or it might be online. Think about Amazon Marketplace. If I go onto Amazon now, I can buy products from thousands, probably millions of producers. Those producers know that it's going to be very difficult for them to catch the attention of consumers just by having their own website. They need to use Amazon as a retailer because that gives them a much bigger presence online and it makes it easier for them to reach consumers. In exactly the same way as food producers, for example, don't try and sell their products direct to us. They go through the retailer, they go through the supermarket. But how about when we buy our food from a local shop? Does that come directly from the producer to the shop on the corner where we live? Well, no, those goods tend to go from the producer to a wholesaler which gathers goods in bulk from a range of different producers, and then it sells those on in smaller quantities to the retailer. So the wholesaler's job really is to break down those big bulks that come from the producer. So they might buy tens of thousands of bags of rice from the producer, and they'll break those down into smaller bags to sell on to the retailer, and then the retailer finally sells them on to the consumer. So, and just a last point to remember is that those consumers are not always people like you and I. Sometimes those consumers are business customers. So in summary, we have a change going on, I think, to some extent. We have this conventional distribution channel, which goes from the producer to a wholesaler or an agent or a broker, and then to a retailer, and then to the consumer. And we see that illustrated in this diagram here. Lots of intermediaries in that chain, and often there will be more than two intermediaries. On the other hand, we have a vertical marketing system, which is more common these days, where products or services go straight from the producer straight to the consumer. This is what we were talking about with Apple and Tesla. Now, that we think about this as being a more modern distribution channel, and in some ways it is. It's becoming more possible. Online sales make this more possible. But we must remember that the online arena is becoming more and more crowded, and there is an increasing need even online for retailers like Amazon to be those intermediaries in the middle. And it's not just goods. If we think about buying bank loans, or we think about buying mortgages or insurance, we will very often go to a comparison website. They are a retailer, an online retailer as well. They are an intermediary. Okay, we're going to end there, and now there are a few questions for you to answer.